3 in the morning. Carson Holt had not been home in 31 hours. He was sitting on the floor of his own office, not in this chair, on the floor, because at some point between the second emergency call and the third cup of cold coffee, his legs had simply stopped cooperating. The office was on the 14th floor of the Holt Meridian Hotel in downtown Vancouver, the kind of hotel where the lobby flowers cost more than most people's rent, and right now the entire financial reporting system had collapsed 6 hours before the quarterly audit. 42 rooms had been double booked. 3 corporate accounts showed negative balances that should have been positive. The tax reconciliation file for the last quarter had vanished from the server. Not corrupted, vanished, and his entire accounting team had been staring at their screens for 8 hours producing nothing except increasingly desperate theories. At 11 he had sent them home. Get some sleep, come back at 6. We will figure it out. But Carson had stayed because that was what you did when you owned the building and the problem and the mess inside it. You stayed on the floor until someone solved something. He had just closed his eyes, just for a second, just to stop the pressure behind them, when he heard it. A cart, wheels on marble, down the hallway, then silence, then typing. Fast, focused typing coming from the direction of the accounting suite, where the door should have been locked and definitely was not supposed to contain a person at 3 in the morning. Carson stood up slowly. He picked up his phone. He walked down the hallway in his socked feet. He had taken his shoes off sometime around midnight and pushed open the door of the accounting suite. The room was lit only by one monitor, and sitting in front of it, in a hotel housekeeping uniform the color of deep forest green, was a woman he had never seen before. She did not look up. She raised one finger one moment. Carson opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. What are you doing? She typed 3 more lines before answering. Fixing your reconciliation file. It is not gone. Someone archived it to the wrong directory in 2019 and the system has been auto-archiving to the same wrong place ever since. She paused. Who set up your folder structure in 2019? Carson stared at her. I am calling security. You can do that after. She hit enter. The screen shifted. There, the file exists, all of it. You have been archiving correctly every quarter for 5 years, just to a folder called Hotel Ops Misc, which, she turned briefly to look at him, is a genuinely terrible folder name. Why does that folder exist? Carson looked at the screen. The file was there. Rows and rows of data, intact, exactly where it should have been, except in a folder that apparently no one had thought to check. He looked at her, then at the screen, then at her again. Who are you, Darcy Wren? She stood, smoothing her uniform. 3rd floor housekeeping. I was doing the late turndowns on 14 when I walked past and the light was on. She gestured at the monitor. The screen was visible through the glass panel. I saw the error message and I could not help it. I tried to keep walking. I genuinely tried. She looked almost frustrated with herself. I made it halfway down the hall. Carson rubbed his face with both hands. You saw an error message through a glass panel at 3 in the morning and you came in and fixed it. I did not fix everything. She turned back to the screen. Your double booking issue is a different problem. Someone has been manually overriding the room allocation system. She pointed at a column of entries. See these? All entered between midnight and 2 a.m. over the past 6 weeks. Always the same override code. She frowned. Who has administrative access to the allocation system? Carson felt something cold move through him that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. That is a very short list, he said quietly. Darcy nodded, studying the screen. Then whoever is on that list has been doing something they should not be doing. She stepped back, folding her hands in front of her. That is as far as I go. The rest is your business, not mine. She picked up her cart handle from beside the door. I should finish the turndowns. Carson held up one hand. Wait. She waited. How do you know any of this? Darcy Wren looked at him with an expression that was not quite patience and not quite impatience. Somewhere in the middle, like someone who had answered this question before and found it tiring every time. My mother was a bookkeeper, she said. I grew up helping her with her ledgers on weekends. I took every free accounting course I could find online after high school. And I have what my mother called a numbers sense, which sounds made up but is essentially just. She paused, looking for the right word. The same feeling you get when a picture frame is crooked, except with spreadsheets. Carson stared at her. A numbers sense. You can call it something else if that sounds too informal. She shrugged. The result is the same. Your reconciliation file exists and someone on your admin access list has been manipulating your room system for 6 weeks. Then she picked up her cart and walked out. Carson stood in the accounting suite at 3:17 in the morning, staring at a screen that had just given him back 5 years of data and a much larger problem than the one he had started with. He let out a breath that came from somewhere very deep. He looked at the door. "Come back tomorrow," he called down the hallway. "Or today, whenever you finish." A pause from somewhere down the corridor. "I start at 6 a.m., Darcy Wren called back. "So technically today," Carson nodded to nobody in particular. "Today then." She was there at 6:03 in the same uniform, holding a coffee from the lobby cafe in a paper cup with the hotel logo on the side, looking like someone who had slept for exactly the right number of hours and was mildly annoyed that not everyone had done the same. Carson had not slept. He was at the small conference table in the accounting suite with 3 printed reports and the expression of a man trying to hold too many things in his head at once. "Sit down," he said. Darcy sat. She took a sip of her coffee with both hands around the cup. "There is a chair wobble on the left rear leg," she said without looking down. "Someone should fix that." Carson looked at her. She looked at the reports. "Can I see the allocation system logs from the past 2 months? He slid a folder across the table. She opened it. She turned pages. She did not speak for 4 minutes, which Carson found either impressive or unnerving. He could not decide which. Then she set a finger on one line in the middle of page 3. "There, that is your pattern. Same override code, same 2-hour window, always a Friday or Saturday night when occupancy is highest." She tapped the page. "Whoever is doing this is deliberately creating double bookings on high-value rooms and then resolving them with a complimentary upgrade." She looked up. "Which means the upgraded rooms are being comped off the books, and if anyone is paying for those rooms off system, that money is not showing up in your revenue reports." Carson felt that cold thing again. "How much?" he said. "Estimated." Darcy looked at the page again. "Based on the volume of overrides and your average upgrade differential for those room categories." She paused, doing something quietly in her head. "Somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000 over 6 weeks. If the pattern started earlier than your logs show," she glanced up, "it could be significantly more." $60,000, Carson said. "Conservatively," Darcy said. He leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a long moment. "Do you want a job?" he said. Darcy looked at him with an expression of polite bewilderment. "I have a job, a different job." She picked up her coffee. "I appreciate the offer, but I clean rooms very well and I have a system." She stood, tucking the folder edge back into alignment. "The chair wobble," she added, "is the rear left leg. Probably a loose bolt. Facilities will fix it if you put in a work order." She left. The chair wobbled. Carson looked at it, then went to find someone from facilities. The morning brought with it the usual rhythm of a large hotel. Deliveries, check-ins, the soft machinery of 300 people moving through a building that was designed to make all of it look effortless. Carson moved through it too, because that was his job, but something had shifted in the way he paid attention. He began to notice things he had not noticed before. At 9:30, he passed the second-floor linen room and heard Darcy Wren from inside, apparently in conversation with no one. "I do not understand how this is organized," she was saying. "This is not organized. This is grief given a physical form. Who put the queen sets here and the king sets there? They are not even close to alphabetical. They are not numerical. What is the system? What is the thinking?" She made a sound of deep personal offense. "There is no system. This is anarchy." Carson leaned against the doorframe. She was reorganizing the entire linen room by herself, moving stacks with efficient precision, muttering quietly the whole time. "Do you do this everywhere you go?" he asked. Darcy turned. "Oh." She did not look embarrassed. "I do it everywhere I work." The linen room was organized wrong. It was adding 4 minutes to every turndown because the staff had to search for the right sizes. She turned back to her stacking. "I fixed the corridor carts on the 3rd floor last month too. Nobody asked me to. But the arrangement was inefficient and it was making me uncomfortable." Carson watched her stack a set of king duvets with the precision of someone who did not know how to do anything carelessly. "You fixed the linen room because the inefficiency was making you uncomfortable." "Correct. And the accounting suite last night. Also uncomfortable," she agreed. "Numbers that do not reconcile feel like a drawer that will not close." She set the last stack in place and looked around the room with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had just fixed something that had been wrong for a long time. "There. 4 minutes saved per turndown, multiplied by 12 rooms per shift, that is almost an hour of labor saved per day." She looked at him. "You are welcome, though no one asked me." Carson smiled. He had not expected to. He went back to his office and sat for a long time looking at the allocation logs. The problem was this. The override code traced to a master administrative account, and the master administrative accounts at the Holt Meridian belonged to exactly 4 people. Carson himself, his head of operations, his IT director, and his chief financial officer, Jeffrey Ashworth, who had been with the hotel for 11 years, who Carson trusted more than almost anyone in the building, and who had, now that Carson was paying attention, suggested the room allocation software upgrade that had created this override capability in the first place. He sat with that for a long time. Then he called his lawyer. Darcy found out about Jeffrey Ashworth the same way she found out about most things, by paying attention to what was happening in the building. She was doing the third-floor turndowns at 3 in the afternoon, when she overheard two of the front desk supervisors talking near the stairwell in the low, tightly controlled voices people used when they were worried about being overheard. Something about the CFO, something about accounts, something about an audit. She kept folding towels. But that evening, she came back to the accounting suite without being asked because the drawer feeling was back. That sensation of something not quite closed, not quite right. Information sitting at an angle it should not have been at, and she found a new set of logs on the desk with a sticky note that said simply, "I left these here by accident. DW." She sat down, opened the file, and went to work. She was still there when Carson came back at 7:30, having spent 4 hours on a call with his lawyer and 2 separate forensic accountants. He stopped in the doorway. "I did not ask you to do this, I know." Darcy did not look up. "But your allocation logs from last year are also here, and the pattern is older than 6 weeks. She turned a page. "It goes back 14 months. Carson came in and sat down. 14 months, at least. She set her finger on a row near the bottom of the page. It was slower at first, 1 or 2 overrides a week. He was testing the system. She tapped the page. He got confident around month 4 and started doing it more frequently. Carson heard something change in his own voice when he said that. Darcy looked up at him then, and he had the distinct impression that she had been carefully not saying the name because she understood that some things were harder to hear out loud. "I am sorry," she said, and she meant it. "When it is someone you trusted, the numbers feel worse." Carson nodded, looked at the page. "How much total?" Darcy had already calculated it. She had calculated it the moment she found the pattern, and she had been sitting with the number for the last 20 minutes, deciding whether to say it all at once or to let him arrive at it himself. She said it all at once because she believed in not letting things be half-closed. A little over $380,000. The room was very quiet. Carson put both hands flat on the table. $380,000. Over 14 months. She paused. "That is the figure from the logs I have access to. If he had other methods outside this system, the total could be higher." Carson looked at the wall for a moment. Then he looked at her. "How did you know to look for this, the first night? You walked past a glass panel at 3 in the morning and you saw an error message on a screen 10 feet away and you knew something was wrong." Darcy considered the question seriously, which was the only way she considered things. "Numbers have a feeling when they are wrong," she said, "like a word spelled incorrectly. Your eye catches before your brain finishes the sentence." She looked at the page. "I cannot explain it better than that. It is the same feeling I get when a picture is crooked or a chair wobbles or the linens are in the wrong order. Something in me just," she made a small gesture, "will not let it go." Carson looked at her for a long moment. "Darcy," she looked up, "I need you to stay until this is done. I need you to work with the forensic accountants. I need you to explain what you found and how you found it." He paused. "And after that, I need to have a serious conversation with you about what you are doing cleaning rooms when you should be doing something else entirely." Darcy looked at him steadily. "What I am doing cleaning rooms is earning a living." She was not unkind about it. "It is a perfectly honorable way to earn a living." "I know that." Carson held her gaze. "That is not what I meant." She looked at him for a beat longer than she needed to, then looked back at the page. "I will stay," she said, "until it is done." Jeffrey Ashworth was arrested on a Wednesday. Carson was not there when it happened. His lawyer had advised him to be elsewhere in the building, to let the process happen without his direct presence, but Melissa Okafor, his executive assistant, called him the moment it was over. "They are gone," she said. It was very quiet. He did not say anything. Carson sat in his office with his hands on his desk and felt something complicated move through him. 11 years. He had trusted this man for 11 years. He thought about the number. $380,000. 14 months. Then he stood up, straightened his jacket, and went to find Darcy. She was on the 3rd floor, doing what she did every afternoon. The turndowns on rooms 301 through 318, working from left to right, systematically, the way she did everything. He found her in 307, folding a towel into a shape that was more precise than anything in the hotel's training manual. She looked up. "It is done," he said. She nodded, kept folding. "Are you all right?" she asked. "No," he admitted, "but I will be." Darcy set the folded towel on the bed and turned to face him. "You did the right thing." She said it simply, without decoration. Some people spend years not doing the right thing because it costs too much. You did it in a week." Carson looked at her. He had received a great deal of support in the past week, from his lawyer, from his accountants, from Melissa. But somehow this was the thing that landed differently. She said it without trying to make him feel better. She said it because she believed it was accurate. He realized that was the thing about Darcy Wren. She did not say things to smooth them over. She said what she calculated to be true. "I need to talk to you," he said, in a more formal context, "tomorrow morning." Darcy looked at him with mild wariness. "That sounds like something that ends with a conversation about my performance. It ends with a contract offer." Carson held her gaze. A very different contract. She looked at him for a moment, then at the towel she had just folded. "The turndowns on 301 through 318 will not finish themselves," she said. "I will wait." She went back to work. He waited. The next morning Carson slid a folder across the conference table. Darcy opened it. She read it carefully. All of it, every clause, the way she did everything, with total attention. Carson watched her eyes move across the page and felt something nervous happening in his chest that he was not quite ready to examine. When she finished, she closed the folder. "Financial Systems Analyst," she said. "That is what we are calling it for now." He leaned forward. "We can find a better title." Darcy tapped the top of the folder. "This is a 6-figure salary, yes. For doing what I already do, for doing what you already do, with recognition, proper resources, and a desk of your own." He paused. "With pen holders, if you want, color-coded." Something moved across her face that might have been the beginning of a smile. "You are trying to win me over with office supplies. Is it working?" She looked at the folder again. "Liam, I do not have a degree. That is Carson, and you do not need one." He kept his voice level. "What you found in that system would have taken my forensic accountants 2 weeks to identify. You found it in 40 minutes. The people who trained those accountants cannot teach what you do. It is either in you or it is not, and it is in you." He held her gaze. "The only question is whether you are going to let someone pay you properly for it." Darcy was quiet for a moment. She looked at him. "What if I make mistakes?" "You will," Carson said. "So will I. That is not a disqualifying condition." She looked back at the folder. Her fingers straightened one corner of it slightly, a small unconscious adjustment, and Carson watched it happen with the feeling of someone witnessing a completely unremarkable thing that was somehow also very revealing. "I will think about it," she said finally. She stood. "The chair leg is still wobbling," she added. "I put in the work order 3 days ago. I will follow up." She nodded and left. Carson sat at the conference table for a moment after she was gone, looking at the folder she had left precisely centered on the surface. He pulled it back toward himself and opened it to the salary page. She had not said no. That was something. 3 days passed. On the first day, Darcy came to the accounting suite in the morning and spent 2 hours with the forensic accountants, walking them through the allocation log analysis, with the patient thoroughness of someone explaining a crossword solution to a person who had not been doing the crossword. The accountants, both of them with credentials on 3 different walls at home, listened to her with expressions that started as polite and ended as genuinely respectful. On the second day, Carson came to the accounting suite to find Darcy had reorganized the entire filing system, physical and digital, into a structure so logical that even Melissa, who had worked with the previous system for 4 years, admitted within 10 minutes that the new one was better. On the third day, Carson was in his office when Melissa knocked. "Mr. Holt." She held a tablet at a careful angle. "Your schedule for the next 2 weeks has been adjusted." He looked up. "By whom?" "Darcy Wren." Melissa's expression was neutral in the way that contained a great deal. "She appears to have accessed the executive calendar system last night and reorganized your appointments. She moved 4 meetings, combined 2 others, and added a recurring block on Tuesday afternoons that says, in her notes, recovery time, not optional." Carson looked at the tablet. Recovery time. She left a separate note explaining that running consecutive high-intensity meetings without cognitive rest contributes to poor decision-making, and that your previous schedule had been doing this to you for at least 8 weeks. Melissa paused. She cited 3 studies. Carson looked at his newly restructured calendar. He thought about the past 8 weeks. He thought about the floor of his office at 3 in the morning. "She is not wrong," he said. "No," Melissa agreed. "She is generally not wrong about things." Another pause. She also left a note about the coffee station on 14. Apparently the mugs are stored with the handles facing inward, which she describes as, and I am quoting directly, "a decision that communicates a fundamental misunderstanding of how human hands work." Carson set down the tablet and laughed. Properly, unexpectedly, the kind of laugh that comes from somewhere you forgot was still there. "The coffee mugs will face outward," he said. "I will pass that along." He was still smiling when Melissa left. He was not smiling 3 hours later when Harris Caldwell walked into his office without knocking. Harris Caldwell was the Holt Group's regional director, Carson's direct superior in the ownership structure, a man in his late 50s with expensive suits and the particular confidence of someone who had never been wrong in his own estimation. He had flown in from Toronto that morning, apparently, and nobody had told Carson. "We need to talk about the Ashworth situation," Harris said, settling into the chair across from Carson's desk as though he had been invited. "The audit is ongoing." Carson kept his voice even. "The forensic accountants are taking too long," Harris said, "and the story is starting to move." He dropped a printed article on the desk, a financial column, a brief mention of irregularities at the Holt Meridian. Nothing specific yet, but Carson looked at the article, looked at Harris. "We are handling it correctly." "You are handling it slowly." Harris leaned forward. "My concern is the person who surfaced this." He picked up a pen from Carson's desk, looked at it, set it back down. "A housekeeper, who apparently wandered into your accounting suite in the middle of the night and started reading your files. She identified a 14-month fraud scheme in 40 minutes. That is not the point." Harris's expression was careful, controlled. "The point is that you have given this woman access she should not have, and when this goes public, the story is not going to be Hotel exposes CFO fraud. The story is going to be Hotel's financial system is so insecure that a housekeeper could walk in and read confidential data at 3 in the morning." Carson was quiet. Harris continued, "I am not saying she did anything wrong. I am saying the optics are a problem. And the solution is to quietly thank her for her help, give her a bonus, and return things to their correct arrangement." He paused. "She is a housekeeper, Carson. There is a reason we have different departments." Carson looked at him for a long moment. "She found $380,000 that we did not know was missing." Harris waved a hand. "The accountants would have found it. In time for this quarter's audit?" Harris did not answer that. Carson leaned back. "I am not going to quietly thank her and return things to their correct arrangement." He picked up the pen Harris had moved and put it back in its original position. "I am going to give her the role she should have had 3 years ago when she was teaching herself accounting from YouTube courses because no one was going to give her the opportunity any other way." Harris looked at him. "You are going to make a housekeeper your financial analyst. I am going to make a financial analyst my financial analyst. The fact that she has been cleaning rooms until now is a failure of perception on the part of every employer she has ever had. I am not going to perpetuate it." He met Harris's gaze. "And if the story goes public, the story is Hotel's housekeeping staff saves company from million-dollar fraud. That is not a bad story, Harris. That is an excellent story." Harris looked at him for a long moment. Then he picked up his jacket and left. Carson sat in the quiet office. He picked up his phone and called Melissa. "Melissa, is Darcy still in the building?" "She is finishing the 3rd floor turndowns, sir. Ask her to come to my office when she is done." There was a brief pause. "She says she has 4 rooms left and she would prefer to finish them before they discuss business." Melissa's tone remained impeccable. "She also says, and again I am quoting, the turndowns will not do themselves and whoever invented the concept of unfinished business clearly never worked in housekeeping." Carson looked at the ceiling. "Tell her I will wait." He waited. Darcy arrived at 6:45, still in her uniform, holding a small notebook she used to track room status. She came in, looked around his office, with the expression she wore when she was cataloging inefficiencies, and sat down. "Your desk is facing the wrong direction," she said. "You should be facing the window. People think better when they can see outside." Carson looked at his desk. It had been in this position for 4 years. "I will move it," he said. She nodded, satisfied. He told her about the conversation with Harris Caldwell. He told her plainly, without softening it, because he had learned that was what she preferred. When he finished, Darcy was quiet for a moment. "He thinks the story is that the accounting system was insecure, yes." She considered this. "Is he wrong?" Carson paused. "About the optics risk or about the underlying point?" "About the underlying point." She met his gaze. "Was it a security failure that I could walk in and access that system?" "It was," Carson said honestly. "And we have already changed the access protocols. But that is a separate question from what you did with the access once you had it." Darcy looked at her notebook. She straightened it on her knee so that it was precisely parallel to the chair edge. "There will be people who agree with him, who think the problem is me being in a room I was not supposed to be in and not the fraud I found there." Carson looked at her. "And what do you think?" She was quiet for a moment. "I think people see the container and not the contents." She did not sound bitter about it, just accurate. "I have had that experience before." She looked up. "But I also think you cannot change what people see by arguing with them. You change it by doing the work until the evidence is too large to ignore. Carson watched her straighten the notebook again, a small unconscious repetition. "Is that what you have been doing?" he asked. "All this time, doing the work until the evidence is too large to ignore." "I have been doing housekeeping," Darcy said. "Which I am good at." She paused. "But yes, partly." He leaned forward and put the folder on the desk between them. The same contract from 3 days ago. He had not changed anything in it. "The desk will face the window," he said. "The pen holders will be color-coded. The filing system will stay the way you organized it, and the coffee mugs will face outward." He held her gaze. "I will fight whatever needs to be fought. That is my problem, not yours. Your problem is deciding whether you are going to stop waiting for the evidence to be large enough." Darcy looked at the folder. She did not reach for it. "I think," she said slowly, "that I have been afraid of being disappointed again." She said it simply, without drama. "I have worked for people before who noticed what I could do and then used it without giving anything back." She looked up. "How do I know you are not one of those people?" Carson thought about it. "You do not," he said. "Not for certain. But I am also the person who waited in the hallway for 45 minutes, while you finished turning down 4 hotel rooms because you did not want to leave a job half done." He paused. "I think we are alike in that. I think we are both people who do not leave things unfinished." Darcy looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached across the desk and took the folder. She opened it. Read the first page again, though she had already memorized it 3 days ago. Then she took the pen from the desk, the correct pen, the one he had put back in its position, and signed her name at the bottom of the page. "Financial Systems Analyst," she said, closing the folder. "For now," Carson agreed. She stood, put the chair back at the precise angle she had found it. "I will start Monday," she said, "and I want to see the Q3 allocation logs before then. I will have them sent to you today." She nodded, picked up her notebook, paused at the door. "The chair wobble on the 3rd-floor conference table," she said without turning around. "It was not the bolt. It was a warped foot. I left a note for facilities with the correct part number." Carson looked at her. "Of course you did." She left. He sat for a moment in the quiet of the office. Then he stood, looked at his desk, and began to move it toward the window. It took longer than it should have, and he knocked over a lamp in the process. And when Melissa came in to see what the noise was, she found him standing in the middle of the room with a very large desk at an awkward angle and an expression that was somewhere between determined and ridiculous. She looked at the desk, then at him. "May I ask," she said carefully, "what we are doing?" "Facing the window," Carson said. Melissa thought about this for a moment. "I will get Gerald from maintenance," she said. "Please," he agreed. The press conference was Melissa's idea, which surprised Carson, because Melissa's ideas were usually small and precise. But this one was not small. "You need to get ahead of the story," she had said that morning, "before someone else tells it wrong." So at 11 o'clock on a Thursday in early November, Carson stood at a podium in the Holt Meridian's main conference room, looking out at a room of journalists, investors, and hotel staff, and told the truth about what had happened. He told it plainly: the fraud, the timeline, Jeffrey Ashworth's arrest, the cooperation with federal authorities. He thanked his legal team and the forensic accountants. And then he said, "But none of this begins without one person." He clicked to the next slide. It was a photograph that Melissa had taken without Darcy knowing. Darcy at the accounting suite workstation, leaning forward, one finger tracking a column of numbers, completely absorbed. Her name is Darcy Wren. She has worked at this hotel for 3 years in housekeeping. At 3 in the morning, 6 weeks ago, she walked past a glass panel, saw an error message on a screen, and could not make herself keep walking. He paused. "Because that is who she is. She sees things that are wrong and she cannot leave them that way." A ripple of something moved through the room. She identified a 14-month fraud scheme in 40 minutes. She restored 5 years of financial records. She did all of it before anyone asked her to, because she has a particular kind of mind that treats broken things as unacceptable. Whether it is a spreadsheet or a linen room or a filing system or a wobbly chair. He smiled slightly. "Everything gets fixed eventually. You just have to get out of her way." He looked out at the room. "She is also our new financial systems analyst, effective Monday. And I would argue she is the most important hire this hotel has made in the past decade, because she sees what we have been missing." He clicked off the slide. He had not looked at Darcy during any of this. He had been too afraid she would have already left. But when the questions began and he finally allowed himself to look toward the back of the room, she was there. Standing near the door in her green uniform. She had not changed, and somehow that was exactly right. With her arms crossed and her expression doing something complicated that she was only partly succeeding in controlling. Their eyes met. She uncrossed her arms. "Your tie is slightly off," she said, loud enough for the front row to hear. The journalist turned. Carson looked down. His tie was, in fact, slightly to the left. He reached up and adjusted it. Better? Darcy tilted her head, assessing. Almost, she said. Come here. He stepped down from the podium and walked through the room and stopped in front of her. She reached up and straightened his tie with quick, precise fingers, the same efficiency she brought to everything, and then she stepped back and looked at it. There. She nodded. Carson looked at her. He said, quiet them. Thank you. For everything. All of it. Darcy looked at the tie, looked at him. Something settled in her expression, some last resistance quietly finishing. You moved your desk, she said. I did, toward the window entirely. She almost smiled. She was working very hard at not smiling, but she was losing. You also put in the work order for the chair. I did. He paused. And the coffee mugs are facing outward. She did smile then. A real one, unexpected, the kind that changed her face entirely. Good, she said. That was the most important one. There was a question from a journalist near the front of the room, something about the timeline of the investigation, and Carson turned to answer it with Darcy still standing beside him, and that was how it was photographed. The two of them standing together at the edge of the room, her in her housekeeping uniform, and him with a perfectly straight tie, both of them looking like people who had just finished fixing something that had been wrong for a long time. 6 weeks later, on a Friday evening, Carson and Darcy were in the accounting suite at 7:30, which was not unusual, because they were both people who worked past 7 on Fridays without really meaning to. Darcy was finishing the Q4 preliminary reconciliation. Carson was reviewing the new access protocols. Outside the window, Vancouver was doing that thing it did in December, where the city lights reflected off low cloud, and everything looked like it was lit from the inside. Carson looked up from his screen and watched Darcy work for a moment. That focused, unhurried attention she brought to numbers, that slight forward lean, the way she occasionally frowned at a figure and then frowned harder until it yielded the information she wanted. Did you eat? He asked. She did not look up. I had something at 4. That is not eating, that is postponing. I was in the middle of a pivot table. She looked up then, with the expression she wore when someone said something demonstrably incorrect. Pivot tables do not wait. They become unstable. Carson closed his laptop. Come on, where? There is a place on Granville that is properly aligned silverware. I checked. Darcy looked at him over the top of her monitor. You checked the silverware alignment. I asked Melissa to call ahead. She looked at him for a long moment. Her expression was doing the complicated thing again. This is a dinner, she said. It is a meal outside the building, Carson said, which I think we have both been overdue for. Darcy looked at the pivot table, looked at him, looked at the pivot table. I will save the file, she said. Please. She saved the file, stood, reached for her coat from the back of the chair, paused. The Q3 variance on the corporate accounts, she said. I found a discrepancy this afternoon. It is probably just a categorization error, but I want to look at it Monday. Monday, Carson agreed. She nodded, buttoned her coat. She paused again at the light switch. Your monitor, she said without looking. Left side. The tilt is off by about 3 degrees. It will cause neck strain. Carson turned and adjusted the monitor. Darcy watched him, making sure he had it right. There, she said. Better. He looked at her. You cannot help it, he said. She turned off the light. No, she said. But you already knew that. They walked out together, and the door clicked shut behind them, and the pivot table waited patiently in the dark, and somewhere on the 3rd floor, a chair with a corrected foot sat precisely level for the first time in 4 years.